Rob's absent today. Love, is it something natural or isn't it? Today on the Manspace.
Welcome to the Manspace podcast. We're your hosts, Doctors Matt Brown and Rob Porter, and clinical therapist Mike Porter.
Nice.
I had to channel my inner Rob. My friend got the patron saint of the Manspace was upset because he's like, "What? So Rob's out of town and you guys just don't do anything? He's only a third of the podcast."
Oh no, it was I totally forgot. Maybe we should throw this out here, even though it's not gonna. I'm assuming we're in the episode now.
Yeah, at this point, I think
this is
so.
it. Yeah, like I guess this will post next week, right? But then it's just you and him next week.
Yeah,
and then it's maybe you and me the week after that.
Does he go out of town again?
He might do that like Montana thing.
Oh, that's right, with his kids. I forgot about that.
So we'll see if he does. If he's listening,
then it'll be
I'm gonna be angry, Rob, because then I don't get to go on my drive to Austin. So maybe you should just stay here and abandon your kids.
Tell your kids. Plus, he will have been with just his kids for 2 weeks because Bex didn't go on this trip.
That's true. Maybe he'll be burnt
you
out.
You should
on
have a week with your wife, buddy.
Oh man, yeah,
you owe it to your wife.
That's funny. I think we have skipped. I'm trying to remember if we've skipped a week before.
We have.
But did we maybe we replayed
I think we
something?
Reposted. Yeah, that's what Jenner came and she goes, "So did you guys not post something today?"
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "No." And I said, "Rob, had something he was going to do, and he."
I seriously think you should have. I was going to say, I would have loved if you did this.
I
Guys,
that was so funny.
Are you here today on the
Guys? Dude, I thought that was so funny. Just me in an empty recording room.
10-second episode.
Guys.
So tell us your good news for the YouTubers. They'll already see it behind you. This is weird. 2 dartboards.
Right. I finally got my Manspace dartboard up. That's my good news. Here, we'll see if we can. Yeah. Now, here's the amazing thing about this dartboard. One, I super love it just because I love a dartboard. Matt made this dartboard for me. I guess I should point that way. Matt made this dartboard for me when I moved.
And in typical Matt fashion, dude, when you sent the pictures, I zoomed in and I'm like, oh man, one of the hinges is crooked.
No, that's the funny thing. I think the hinge.
No, I remember from when I made it. I was like, dang it! There's one little thing that was crooked.
Well, but I think I popped a hinge, because I went to go close it last night, and it won't connect up top.
Oh,
and so I think when
maybe.
I was lifting it up, I think it
Well, you're just going to leave it open anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got to have the scoreboards on display.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah,
I freaking love that thing.
Well, maybe next time we have a travel day, you can just put the camera on your board and we can play.
Right. See, that's what I'm saying.
But you'll have to be real close so we make sure you're not cheating.
You guys will never.
Well,
it'll be the best game of my life.
I was going to ask, yeah. So,
triple bullseye
from where you're throwing. Do you have it's 7 foot 4 inches is regulation?
Yeah.
Have you stood there yet and kind of seen?
No, but it's I think I measured it once and it's just on the other side of my fridge.
So when you throw, let us know how you feel. It's amazing.
That we're standing.
Well, compared to what we were doing before, it literally feels like you're just reaching out and sticking the dartboard in the dartboard. I have less respect for professional dart players now.
When I was hanging it last night, once I got it up on the board, I was, following all the measurements and stuff, and it's supposed to be 68 inches.
Like the bullseye, right? To the ground?
Yeah, the bullseye is supposed to be 68 inches to the ground. So when I put it up, I thought, this feels way higher than Matt's.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's just because there's nothing underneath mine.
Yeah, that's true.
Like,
And
it is just empty wall.
I think it's 68 inches, which is 5'8", right?
Yeah.
I think mine might actually be a little bit low. Don't tell anybody.
I won't. Plus, if yours was any higher, imagine how many times I'd hit your fan.
That's true. Yeah, and I think I put it on the wall in like the most aesthetically pleasing place.
Yeah.
So throwing regulation to the wind.
I was going to say, I'm sure if Jenner had been in charge, she would have had me lower it a little bit.
Uh-huh.
But I was like, no, this is like, it's regulation.
Yeah. Grow an inch or two.
Do it.
Yeah. Well, nice. So you want to jump in?
Yeah. Welcome, Spacemen, even though we've been talking for like 20 minutes.
Welcome to the topic. No, I was going to say you already did the welcome. I said nice to your intro.
That's true.
That'll play right after the music. Me going, nice.
Dude. I'm so glad I don't have to edit this stuff. No, so here's the, like, you kind of brought this to me, and when I first read it last night, I was a little bit like, I liked it, but I wasn't really. I was like, I don't know how much I have to kind of say about it.
I think you'll have a lot to say.
Well, that's, as I started kind of getting into it more, I was like, oh no, I kind of do. So do you want to explain who Eric Fromm is briefly?
Yeah, so this is like a book from the 1950s that's been in my to read pile for a long time. It's called The Art of Loving, but it's quoted a lot. So he was a philosopher and psychologist, and but he's written a bunch of books. But this one, I think, does a really good job of describing what mature love is supposed to look like. We've talked about this on other episodes, but and it's weird. It is weird reading a book from like such a different time about concepts that have changed in our conceptualization. Like even just like the art of loving.
Yeah.
Now everything is the science of love.
Right.
And I think, and I want to speak a bit to like maybe how that gets applied, just particularly when it comes to men, right? When you think of it as like a science versus an art. But basically there's like 4 main tenets of love, even though he goes through different types of love. Like he talks about brotherly love, which is kind of the most universal type of love that he describes, and then like parent-child, and then romantic. I can't remember if he calls it romantic or erotic love, but basically same concept, right? Like the only addition to these 4 components that we'll talk about in romantic relationships is like sexual exclusivity. But when I thought about these, I'm like, when I first just heard them, I'm like, okay, that's not what I would have thought of if I think what are the 4 main components of love. But when he breaks it down, I'm like, oh, cool. It captures like so much of what we talk about and so much of what like science about relationships now highlights. So do you want me to just read them?
Yeah.
So 4 areas of love. So this is from The Art of Loving by Eric Fromm, and it's Fromm.
Yeah.
The extra M is for manly love. So it's care, responsibility, respect, and knowledge. So let me break them down, and then we can kind of like, I'll just give a description, I guess, of each, and then we can kind of go into them. So for care, he just talks about that as like the active concern for the life and growth of the person that we love. So kind of like that natural concern for somebody else's well-being.
Yeah.
That we all kind of hope exists in a relationship. The responsibility. How I don't know if I want to say this now or I'll say it at the end. So I'll just go through these. But responsibility,
Okay.
he talks about it more like, when you hear responsibility, your typical response is something external being handed to you, right? This is your responsibility, right? But he breaks the word down into response and able. So it's a willing action, right? Like I'm able to respond. And because I possess that care for your well-being, my response is like in service of that, right? And then respect. So this is, I can't remember if it's Latin or probably is Latin, but the Latin root of the word respect has something to do with seeing accurately or fully. So basically respect in this context is I can fully see you for who you are, what you can become, and I can give space for that to develop on its own without like me coercing it or needing something from it.
Yeah.
And then knowledge is partially, I think, because of that respect piece. I know you deeply enough that I know kind of the inner workings of your heart. And so when you respond to me, maybe like angrily, I know that that's really, you're feeling hurt. Right. And I know that, what you've been through. And so I kind of, although I wouldn't just sit there and kind of like let you yell at me and take it.
Right.
Like I can see what's actually going on for you in different moments. And maybe even more so than that, like when something comes up in our relationship, I have that level of insight to know like that would probably be hard for you. Right. And again, maybe circling back to that caring, but I like it because I feel like the first two are kind of like relationship oriented. And then the last two are a little bit more like autonomous, right? Individual, like room for the other person.
Right.
So yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's, man. So one, I actually really love the idea that, right, that love is an art. I mean, you could call it a science because either way, whether you call it science or art, it requires effort.
Yeah.
Right. And that's each of these four things like represent examples of the kind of effort it takes to really love I don't know why I just air quoted that, but to really love somebody, it takes these different things. I have no idea what time it is.
It's 2:35. You're good.
Yeah. Well, because I was just wondering, like, looking at these four things, which one do you think is, like, in the work that you do with people, which is the one that you most often see missing? Or maybe which is the one you most often see misunderstood?
I guess I'd have two different answers, right? Missing and misunderstood. And I think that to riff off of what you were saying before about art and science, I think it'll tie into my answer here. Like art, when I think art, I think creation, right? And then when I think science, I think confirmation. And so I think if you're in a science minded place in a relationship, you're just, I'm not saying that science doesn't involve curiosity and all of that, right? But like,
does,
but I think it's kind of like hypothesis driven, right? And so sometimes I think as men, if we're coming at it from a science mind, it's like, well, that thing that I did should have produced this and it didn't. So instead of looking at that as, oh, well, then maybe my hypothesis was wrong, we kind of double down, right? And I think women do it too, right? But from the art side of it, if it's like, this is something we are creating and nurturing along and growing, and so I will need to continue to get better at it, then it's just a different way to approach it. But I think the one that is missing the most, I think, is the respect one, right? Like there's just not enough toleration of the like the vulnerability that goes along with allowing yourself to be fully seen so that your partner can respect you. Meaning like not respect you, meaning like approve of you or, whatever. It's more like he was saying, it's seeing you, right. And like
Right.
allowing
Yep.
space for you and being able to see your partner for who they are, not what you need them to be to cover yourself
Yeah.
up. And then misunderstood, I think is, like the care piece, particularly for men, right? Because it's like, my job is to be, the happy wife, happy life mindset
Yeah.
of like, my job is to be, kind of at your service, right? And there's no room for me to be like tired or spent or need space, and just communicate that to you in a way that indicates that it's fine for me to feel that way, and we'll still be okay, right? And when I do things for you, if they don't land and you don't give me the response I want, then like I get defensive and I kind of like double down on like, well, that's what you said you wanted, right? And it's like, so I think that I think needs some development, but I also think, I think it's just more of a misunderstanding that when you kind of get your head on straight about it can work better. But the respect thing, I think that takes a lot of growth, a lot of time to just kind of nurture yourself and your relationship into a space where you can say like, here I am, right? Like, and we're different.
That's the thing that you said that I hadn't, when I was thinking of respect, right? I like the part that stuck out to me when I first was kind of looking at it, looking into it, was this idea of without trying to mold the other person to be the person you want or need them to be, right? Mm-hmm. But the thing you said about the fact that we'll often do this so that we can keep parts of ourselves hidden. Mm-hmm. Like, no, I need you to shift because I don't want to have to confront that. I don't want that aspect of my personality coming out. So I need you to shift that so that my part can stay. Mm-hmm. And so that you don't have to see it and I don't have to risk your reaction. Right. So I need you to not do that behavior because I don't know the reaction that's going to come from me if you do. Mm-hmm. Or I do know and I don't like it. I don't like where it's going to go. I don't like any of that stuff. And so that idea of knowing yourself well enough to kind of let yourself be seen, and then at the same time choosing to see your partner for who they are, not mm-hmm. the person like and I'm sure you've heard this phrase a lot too. You're not the person I thought I married.
Yeah.
Which generally when clients say that, I'm like, and aren't we glad for that? Like, I think of the guy that I was at 20 something and I think I'm so glad I'm not that guy anymore.
Yeah.
Like, he had a lot of positives, but I'm glad I'm not that guy anymore. Mm-hmm. And the respect one I think is difficult. How do you, when you talk to people, like, how do you get them to see it? I mean, no, go with that question.
I can't remember who said this, but I think you have to start with like a pretty high level of like toleration. Mm-hmm. Because at first, when you're letting yourself see each other for who you actually are, you have to tolerate your own distress about that, right? But you also mm-hmm. have to tolerate the dismantling of all of these kind of beliefs and expectations that you've put on the head of your relationship and the other person. And those things just like fire up in moments where somebody does something that all of a sudden like presents some risk, right? Like, well, if they do or don't do this, then that means, all these other things. And it's like, only if you're in that mindset. Right. And as I'm saying this, I just really want to emphasize again, like, this is really hard work that takes a lifetime. So
yeah,
I don't have it even close to figured out. And, but I can say more often than not, I have a desire to figure it out. Right. Yeah. I still have moments where I'm like, I don't want to figure this out. Like, I just want to do what's easy. Right. But, so we have to give ourselves room to explore this. But I think, like the first level is just accurate information, right? Like we need to open up about things that we just don't say to each other because
Yeah.
I think you might disapprove, or I don't think you would like it, or based on what you've told me you need, if I tell you kind of how I actually feel about that, you'll experience that as a betrayal or abandonment or something, right? So I have to kind of just get it out there, and then we're going to have to kind of sit with this and recognize that there's nothing wrong here, right? It's differences, different people. And if we hold tight to the idea that the more we can create room for this, the better off we're both going to be, right? The extent to which we both feel like we can be ourselves is going to amplify our ability to connect with each other.
Yep.
And I think over time, maybe there's a lot of toleration, right? And there's a lot of things that we just kind of say, that's just, that's who that person is in a way, that's their preferences, that's the way they go about this. I think over time you can start to feel, I think, what love is really supposed to be, and love in its most rewarding form, which is I know you deeply and I have a desire to give you something that will like benefit you, be valuable to you. And I'm not thinking about running short on that resource.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore like holding it close in some sort of transactional way that, if I give it to you, you better give some back. Right.
Yeah. I'm not worried about, or I'm not doing it with the intent to try to get something.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've had a couple of clients where I'm like, look, if you're trying to do something because you want something from it,
mm-hmm.
that's fine, but they need to know up front. Like,
yeah. Right.
Because if you're hiding this,
yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, then you're just going to you're going to end upset. They're going to end upset. Everyone's going to be upset. So if you actually want something from this behavior, then you need to tell them, hey,
mm-hmm.
I'm doing this, but this is kind of my expectation,
mm-hmm.
which, when I say that, they're like, well, but I don't. And I'm like, okay, then you need to figure out a way to, because it is that idea. And I think that's part of that responsibility piece
mm-hmm.
of responding to their needs because you want to, not
mm-hmm.
because you're trying to get something from it, not because there's an angle to be played,
mm-hmm.
Not because I'm trying to put us back on equal grounds because you did this thing for me, so now I need to do this thing for you so that we stay
mm-hmm.
kind of even. You're simply doing it because you feel that want, that responsibility, right? And I love that idea of a willing response,
mm-hmm.
because lots of the guys that we work with talk about obligation and burden.
Yeah.
These are things I have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that, right? It's not to say that you don't have moments or times where the response is a willing response, where it is, the kind of responsibility that Fromm is talking about. But it's kind of recognizing, yeah, okay, for whatever reason in this area, it still just feels obligation,
mm-hmm.
right? And kind of understanding where that is coming from for yourself, and figuring out, okay, like, why is that where I'm at?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I don't want to say, maybe I don't even want to say most men, because I don't know, but maybe a lot of men would identify with what you're saying in terms of like my whole motivation and orientation is about like satisfying and removing as many burdens as I can so that I can have
Mm-hmm.
peace.
Yep.
And if peace is just like the lack of people needing something from you, like that's a pretty fragile and shallow peace.
Yeah.
But I think that if you turn these 4 principles inward and ask yourself, like, how much do I enact these principles to myself?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where a lot of guys would say, yeah, I don't do any of that. Right.
Yeah.
And so if I don't do any of that, I'm drawing from like a dry well when you're asking for things. And I can squeeze out a few drops here and there for requests, but then I'm tapped out. And then, I'm satisfied sitting next to a dry well so long as no one's asking me for water, right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's a pretty crappy place. Don't you ever get thirsty? And I think a lot of guys could say like, no, I'm good, man. I just kind of sustain myself on my own saliva and like,
Yeah.
just, like sit there. But it is a really, really hard, transition for a lot of guys to say, what would it be like to have a little bit of water in here? Right. Not like that I've gathered from other people's wells. Cause sometimes I think
No.
that's how it manifests, is like this
Right.
kind of like cutthroat, competitive, or like narcissistic view of, I'm going to make sure I have what I need. Right. And I'm not really going to pay attention. But I think, just take care. Like how many guys would say I have a genuine concern for my well-being, not my ability to escape, ability to check out, ability to like perform at a hyper productive level that satisfies everybody around me, but like my well-being, right? Like what messages have I gotten that have told me, hey guys, it's a good thing for you to make sure your health, is good, that you get to feel happy, that you get to laugh, that you get to do things that you enjoy with the people you love, that, like, I think there's a yearning for that, but I don't know that a lot of guys give themselves the time to think at that level. Do you respond kind of from a willing place towards things that are important to you? And again, if you're sacrificing yourself in all these ways because you're thinking that you're doing good for those around you, I think fundamentally that lie just breaks down pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And then you end up
it's not sustainable. Like it's not, it's like you said, right? At some point that well is going to dry up.
Mm-hmm.
And when it does, that's it. You got nothing left.
Yeah.
And it's funny because looking at these, I hadn't even considered the self aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
But like, looking at these and with care, the active concern for the life and growth of what we love.
Mm-hmm.
Like how often as men are we doing things that help us feel like we're growing in some aspect, right? Whether it's like learning a new, area of interest, or picking up a new hobby and developing a new skill. Like, do we actually have an interest in doing that for ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
I think the care one stood out because I thought, no, most guys I know, when they step into the role of a husband and when they become fathers, and even when they reach certain levels of friendship, I think and maybe this is just people I like, like my circle of friends and people I know,
Mm-hmm.
but Fromm talks about the principle involving nurturing and protecting and fostering the well-being of the loved one.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, no, that seems to be a pretty natural response for most guys, right? Once they're into it, they're like, well, no, but this is, I nurture and I protect and I want to make sure that you have what you need to grow.
Mm-hmm.
But are we doing that for ourselves?
Yeah.
Are we saying, okay, but what do I need to grow?
Yeah.
And I think we could look at that for each of the four and say, where's the thing you're doing for you, right? Are you helping yourself? Not because you have to, but because you want to.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of things that I do because I'm like, I guess I have to. Like that's a lot of like, clients that are like, I'll ask them, so what do you do for yourself? Well, I go to the gym. And I'm like, is that for you or is that like habit? Like, is that like a checklist item?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
because
it could be either. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It can, for sure. It can be both.
Mm-hmm.
But for most of them, when they're being honest about it, they're like, no, it's kind of a checklist item. Most days I hate doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, right. So that's not the voluntary,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the, no, this is an obligation. It's a burden to me to go do
Yeah.
it. And
Mm-hmm.
there's that difference there, right?
Yeah.
This is, I think we could probably do more episodes.
No, we could.
on
And
these topics.
I think with what you were saying before too, the care piece, I think another thing that oftentimes is common for men is, well, nobody does that for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do it for myself. So I'll take care of me. You take care of you. Like, don't, it's kind of this like hardcore individualistic mindset.
It becomes
where
overly, yeah.
Yeah. Where it's like, basically it's not, am I being well cared for, but am I complaining or not? And my rule in my head is, yeah, I do hard things and I don't complain. So neither should you. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the complaint usually isn't like I'm, some, overly dependent person that desperately needs you to pour into me. And if you don't, I get to be mad at you because of the agreement we have relationally. That does happen. But I think more often than not, it's like, I want to give this to you, right? I want to give you this caring, but you don't know how to receive it. And also you don't know how to give it. So like, if a relationship is supposed to be two people kind of connecting on these levels, and as a result experiencing more exponential growth than you can individually, then what are we doing? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why are we together, right? And part of our agreement is that if we're together, we're going to support each other, but we're also going to expose each other to the areas that we need growth. And if we both have that mindset that I want to become a better version of myself as a result of being with you,
Mm-hmm.
then it's easier to hear those things, right? But like, I think sometimes in the process of getting to know each other, right? Like you were saying to that point of, you're not the person I married, right?
Yeah.
And I guess I'll say this first. This is on a human level, on an emotional level. What I'm about to say is extremely difficult, and I don't know how I would handle it. So I get that a lot of people would just need to tap out and say, I can't do this, right? At the same time, there are principles at play that I think are really important where, like, if I'm saying, now that I know you for who you really are, I'm not attracted to you anymore, right? Now I've put you in a position of being something other than yourself so that you can give me the feeling of excitement and attraction because I'm bored.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a much better question to ask, like, what is it about me that prevents me from offering love to somebody as they are? And honestly, I think that is one of the hardest things we have to do as human beings. Learn to see people for who they actually are and just give them love at that place.
Regardless.
And then, sit back and kind of watch the growth happen. And again, if we're not coming from a place of being filled up, then it does feel like I'm incurring some sort of loss by giving you love, when really it should feel like, in its ideal form, right? Love feels like something that has no limit, and like you can pour out, and the act of pouring it out fills you up, right? Like that's the pinnacle experience of love. But I think that's so far out of what we experience oftentimes, that we don't even believe it exists. Mm-hmm. And so we just kind of settle for as far as we've gotten with it, or we retreat from it. And so back to your question of how do you help people along that path? Like, I still have a ton to learn there, and I'm still struggling with all of the things I've been talking about, right? But I think just like opening it up into a conversation where you can say, is there any interest in moving in that direction? Like, do we have any hope that is a possibility at some level for you, right? And I think it's a really liberating experience, I think, when you touch it even just a little bit, right? Like, yeah.
Well, and it's interesting to me because I think Um, in my head, I could see some clients thinking, yeah, I don't think I want to go there with this person anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And to that, my first thought was, you did once.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think when we first, like, enter into the relationship at a more committed level, right? I'm not talking about like first dates and stuff like that. At a more committed level, I think this is kind of the ideal that we all have. I don't think we know it, but this is what we all think we're signing up for and doing,
Mm-hmm.
right? These ideas of, right, like I can be like the number, right, all over movies. I can be me.
Yeah.
And I just feel so seen by you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like these are the lines from movies that come up over and over again. I think, right, that's what he's talking about here. He's talking about these things. And I think on some level, without recognizing it, it's the ideal we're all, when we get into the relationship, thinking that's where we're going. That's the
Mm-hmm.
ultimate of this relationship.
Yeah.
But again, it's an ill-defined thing for us, because
Mm-hmm.
it's not something that we've, so many of us still believe in this idea of falling into love.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the quotes from the book. Was I'm not gonna be able to pull it up.
No, I know what you mean, where it's like, it wasn't that long ago that the idea was you are assigned a partner
Yeah,
and love
yeah,
will come, right?
right,
But then
right,
it became this kind of chemistry type of feeling
right.
that was primarily focused on sex.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that physical attraction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's like that. I think that's one of the things that I kind of appreciate about the whole, someone else choosing,
Mm-hmm.
is because there are. I don't have enough experience to be able to say a lot or whatever, but there are those where no, they live a wonderfully happy life
Mm-hmm.
together, right? And they do grow into this kind of love that we're
Yeah.
talking about. And I think that's the potential, like you said, that exists within these four areas as we kind of begin to explore them in ourselves and then explore them, as a couple. I think it just opens up so much the potential for the relationship, for the strength of it,
Yeah.
for what it can become.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts?
No, I was just going to say, well said, man.
Yeah.
That's it. I know
All
this is
right.
a
Nailed
shorter
it.
one, but
It is, because Matt's got clients. Wah, wah.
yeah. So
No drink store run for Matt.
nope. But take this in, spacemen, reflect, and we'll catch you next time on the Manspace. Insert Rob.